checking out the Sportsline Podcast here on chch.com or Parrot TV. I'm Bubba O'Neill. As you know, this is a landing spot in the 905 where teams, executives, and broadcasters are in the forefront. The storylines that you love and appreciate in this area are many. Let's get down to business with a franchise where failure is not an option. The Canadian Premier League's 8th season is underway, and last year's CPL Shield winners are seeking a domestic double in 2026. Forge FC, who have filled their trophy case like no other squad in the CPL, have a rebuilt roster, a renewed opportunity, and under their original head coach, Bobby Smyrniotis, have the same expectation to win. Following early season victories over Ottawa and Vancouver, an old rival is on the way to Hamilton, as they always do. Forge and Calvary FC always deliver excitement. Fresh off today's training session, let's say hello to Coach Bobby. How are you?
Doing well, Bubba. Thanks for having me on.
Hey, appreciate you coming out. I know you're a busy man. You know, there's just so much to digest here in the short time that we have, but I do want to get into a couple of things that I don't think a lot of people in our area, and maybe anyone listening to this podcast or watching this podcast, want to know about you. I mean, what I did not know is that you played Division I soccer in the United States at Charleston, came and played at York. I mean, can you tell me a little bit about those days?
Yeah, those were quite a few years ago. Obviously, good experiences, and gave me a lot of experience in chasing the game in different ways through Division I soccer, trying to do things overseas as well. And I've tried to pass on a lot of that experience and knowledge to the next generation of players in my role before here at Forge and working in youth development. And that's given me a very good perspective on the global game at different levels.
I must ask you this, because we have a lot of players that are good, successful players that have good experiences and win or lose or whatever their experiences are, but there's a decision to teach somewhere along the line. When did that happen for you? Because that's a big commitment, and sometimes some of the best players in the world at any sport are not very good coaches.
Yeah, I think for me early on, I was involved in the development side and working with youth players, and it's fascinating to watch young kids grow in the game, just how much information they can take in, and just their development year by year. And I've been blessed here in Canada to work with some very good young players who turned out to be some fantastic professionals. A lot of guys that play here at Forge over the years, Kyle Becker being one of them, to players on the Canadian national team like Kyle Laren. And I think it's great to see those players just go through each year of their development and see where they reach their maximum potential. And working with the youth, it's not only about professional, but it's about playing the game beyond youth football. A lot of the guys on scholarships, various things, but also being able to see a lot of those players now get into coaching. Because that's something I took up very early in my life at around 22 years old, and just a great a bug in me that keeps me in the game, and I've loved it ever since.
Do you have and feel free to pat yourself on the back here. What is it for you? Is it a drive to win? Is it a drive to teach, an eye for evaluation? What is it that keeps you going on a daily basis?
Yeah, I think when I started here, to be honest, in 2019 was the first time I had to win. It was important to win. Before that, in developing players, it was about the player. It was about solely about the development of the player, then moving on to the next level. So the challenge I had to give myself and my staff is that we find a way to blend both, staying true to the roots of developing players, because I think if you develop players, you'll develop a better team. And then trying to marry that with the internal pressure of winning. Because, at the professional game, it's results. And I think, that was a great challenge going into the first year. And I think we found a very good recipe for that. I think each and every day has to be an enjoyable day for the players. They have to enjoy training. So that's where the development component comes in. And then you sprinkle in the competitive nature. And that needs to translate to the weekend. That needs to translate to getting 3 points. And if you're out here doing the things right, if you're consistent, and we talk about this a lot in sport, consistency is the most important thing, then results come. We've been blessed over these years that we've been able to put those two areas together and come out with some pretty good results.
Who's your mentor? Is there someone at the highest level of the sport, whether it be in England, Germany, the Bundesliga, PL, MLS, is there someone in terms of a manager that you sort of model yourself after, or at least there are lessons to be learned from that person that, maybe turn you on some way when it comes to the sport?
Yeah, the one thing I learned very, very early on, and I was blessed. I had a very good teacher when I was very young at Olympiacos, a gentleman who's passed away, and I call him my first football father. And he taught me all the fundamentals. He taught me how to coach and do things in a proper way, where before that I didn't really have a clue. You thought you were just out there. It was X's and O's and tactics. But he put me on the right path. And then early in my career, I spent a lot of time with Ajax in Amsterdam. And, they have a distinct way of doing things. But the first thing they'll tell you is you have to find your own way to do things. So I think it's about looking at a lot of different people. There's a lot of coaches you always look at different levels of the game to see what they're doing. But I think it's about taking components from Guardiola, taking components from Klopp, from Simeone in Atletico Madrid, who's more defensive. So I think you take these different things, the competitive nature and the psychological components of a guy like Jose Mourinho, and you look at these different things. And then I've spent a lot of time at top clubs around the world, and just watching how they work, and it's constant education. But I think when you come back to it, you have to filter it into your own DNA. What do you want as a coach? What do you want your teams to look like? What's your demeanor as a person? And you try and translate that into the group.
2026, new year, new season, new expectations. But I will say this, Bobby, and I don't know if you spend much time looking back, and you give me the sort of impression that you aren't a person that looks back. You always are looking forward. But you have to admire your consistency in terms of league success. Is that something that you're proud about?
Yeah, I'm proud of it. I'm proud of the team for it because it's tough. It's one thing we've learned is it's a very tough business to win. And you need to be able to keep that consistency high. You need to be able to be, the first one showing that consistency as a coach, as a staff towards your players, and you're able to bring the players' levels up all the time. And then slowly, when you've done it enough, you start building tradition. And I know we're still new as a club in year 8, but we've built a great tradition. So players who are coming in here, they understand the expectations. We've got a great leadership group that understands the expectations. And we know that, if you want to take a week off in training, if you want to take it easy for a couple of weeks, that's going to cost you. So, when you come into this club, it's a tough task for players, but they thoroughly enjoy it. It's hard work. It's good work. It's enjoyable. And if you do it right, you usually reap the rewards. It's not always going to be there. So you got to make sure you don't take things for granted. And you only look back as a guide to what's given you success. You don't look at it and say, we'll just have success in the future. You look at those things that have worked. And then as a coach and a team, you look at, what new things you can sprinkle in each and every year. Is that tactical? Is that how you work with them physically, on the field, off the field? Different things. Mostly for us, it's the tactical approach and trying to give the guys different looks. So we make sure we keep things fresh season after season.
Because of your consistency in the league and the CPL league and your domestic league, you've had the opportunity to do some things that many clubs have not done. And obviously CONCACAF Champions Cup would be one of them. But the interesting thing is the timing is maybe a little bit off for you guys. And the fact that you have a short training session to get the guys going and figure out who your team is. You're playing at a kind of off time in the middle of winter in some cases. And in this year's case, you get a tough draw with Tigres, who I believe are in the quarterfinals and look to be going to the semifinals. But with that said, what can you learn about your club in those kind of situations? As I said, playing an off season, new club, quality team that's already into their season.
Yeah, to be honest, we've done this now for 4 seasons where we've had to play these early games and against some of the toughest opponents in the region with the Mexican clubs who are in full fitness. But you get to learn a lot about your team. We have a lot of new players this year, and you learn quick. Why? Because you learn under fire, as they say. The games against Tigres may be some of the most challenging games we'll play, against the level all season. And the quality of the opponent. So you learn very quick a lot about the resiliency of your players, how they can stick strictly to tactical concepts when we've only worked for 3 to 4 weeks. And, you take a lot of positives. I take a lot of positives out of this year's group and those matches with Tigres. I thought the guys were fantastic. And that also gives the guys a little bit of a glimpse, especially the new guys, of, where they are, what this club stands for, and, how we always think big. And that gives you a little bit of a, running start into the season.
You start the season in the CPL League with a win over Ottawa, who were the Cup winners from last year. At home, first game of the match, national television, exciting match at that as well, too. Had to feel good.
Yeah, it always feels good. It's we know it's a long road. To the Shield with 28 games in the season, but we always talk about it in these first 7 games. The most points you can deposit into the bank account, they'll come in very helpful as the season goes on, and different situations arise with cup games, midweek games, and so on. So, we want to be as good as possible in this first round of games against each of our opponent, where, let's be honest, we both don't know a lot about each other. It's a new season, and as you get a couple of games in, you can start, looking at a team and seeing where their tendencies are. So it's a lot about focusing on ourselves. And like I said, the most points you can get out of these games, it's always going to benefit us down the road.
First trip on the road goes all the way out to the West Coast. And, well, I guess never late than never, right? Feeling on coming through at the 90th and with a big-time goal. And when you have those type of victories where it looks like, points are going to be divided and you end up getting the 3 points, it's got to be a good trip back home.
It's an excellent trip back home, and it shows the resilience of the group, and that's who we are as a team, because a few minutes before that, we've missed a penalty shot where you can easily put your head down and say, that's that. But that's the mentality of this group, and that's the mentality of a group that wants to be a champion. It's you got to go. You got to go the whole time. You got to make sure you go to that final whistle and give yourself a chance to get the maximum of what you get out of that. And, yeah, these early trips out west are always an interesting one, especially for new players, especially for some of our foreign players, a couple of guys from France who, we're basically saying, Coach, we could have flown back to France in the time it takes to fly out to Vancouver. And, then it's time zones. They start asking if we're at altitude. And I'm like, guys, we're right next to the Pacific Ocean. But, it's different. Yeah. They're used to a 1-hour bus ride or a 30-minute flight to go to games, and here you're flying for 5 hours and changing 3 time zones. So it's good to get those experiences too out of the way early in the season for some of the players who haven't lived it. And then they obviously get 3 points, everyone's happy, and you're on a red eye back, which is another experience.
Well, your fan base, your supporters, licking their chops for what's coming up on Saturday, Cavalry FC. There's just something special, and this goes right back from the beginning of the Canadian Premier League, where you two teams or you sides, I don't know what it is. You can probably explain this to me, but I'll start with this. In I guess maybe one of their strengths. Can you tell me what it's like for, I'm thinking your defensive midfielders, your fullbacks, when it's to guard Tobias Warshevsky? Why is he such a problem?
Yeah, I think, he's a quality player, not only now with Calgary, but, he played a few years back at the FC Edmonton, and you can see his qualities by then. He's a big body, and he's got very good feet. Very smart on the ball, and he's got a lot of good qualities of a modern striker. And I think, that always poses problems, and he's a very important player to their squad, that's for sure.
Do you game plan for him?
I mean, you game plan around the team and the tactics, not necessarily the individuals. That's just our way of doing it. Others would. So it's more about how we close certain spaces on the pitch and different things from that component, but not so much lasered in on a player. I mean, these guys, they know each other well. They've played each other. It's not a player that's new to the league. So defenders know his tendencies. He knows defenders' tendencies. So you rely on that experience of the players.
All right, now I'm actually gonna go there, and I've been wanting to ask you this question for the entire length of this CPL run here. Tommy Wheeldon Jr. Is there a rivalry between the two of you?
No, I wouldn't say so. I think the teams do a good job. The teams are reflective of who their coaches are. But yeah, I wouldn't say on an individual component. I don't really pay attention to the coaches of the other teams, but more of what my team is doing and what the results that we have. We're a club that focuses 90% on ourselves, 10% on the opponent, and in the end of the day, 22 players step on the pitch and they dictate what's going to happen. We're just there to guide them, to try and give them the positive advice, but the players are the ones that go out there and get the job done.
You're a great coach, because I know this has been a conversation in the CPL circles, and I saw him, Tommy, kind of, I don't know what was going on between him and Diego Mea on the weekend. There was some words exchanged, and I was like, wow, this is really interesting that Tommy seems to get the most out of coaches, and I know this was, as I said, has been a conversation over the years. Well, okay, so we've set up what I think is going to be a great match. Obviously, I'm not going to ask for the game plan, but what is the confidence of your club going into a match like this? Both teams 2-0.
I think you always feel good. You've played 2 matches. You haven't been your best. I think we've got a lot of levels to us, and you've got 6 points. So there's a good feeling. We obviously play some very good football here at Hamilton Stadium. The guys enjoy playing at home in front of our crowd and the energy that they provide us. So we look forward to an excellent crowd, and for them to be there and making sure that they're supporting us and pushing us along. And what is the 3rd game of a long season?
Well, speaking of, I think you're going to have a long career, and I'm going to end this on this question here. Obviously, you're focused on the now, but I have to believe there's part of you, because you wouldn't be as good as you are in terms of a coach, and not looking somewhat to the future. I know your name was tossed around in many circles around the country when the Jesse March took that job leading the national team. Is there a big picture for you, bigger than the CPL right now? I know you're focused on the future, no doubt, but is there anything else you think that would be out for you?
Yeah, I always say there has to be. There has to be a drive of each and every individual, especially in this sport, where until we get to, and I say this often, until you get to Real Madrid, Barcelona, Manchester City, that's the top of clubs. It's, you have to have that drive to keep on going. It's the same thing I talk to the players about. You have to have that drive to keep on pushing yourself forward, and when you do things right, different opportunities come. It's not something that we're chasing. We love our situation here at Forge, and obviously that's why I'm here in year 8. It's a great place to not only work, but just to be around everyone and put your stamp on what we're doing here, which is a challenge in itself each and every year to keep the club at this level. We've got all the other clubs in the league each year trying to find a way to do this, and we're the only one that's kept that consistent for 7 years. So there's always that motivation to keep on going, and you have to have the motivation to think bigger and think higher. So that's always there, and I know that's something that'll come in the future.
Are you surprised at the success of this league?
No, because the league is centered around Canadian players, and having worked with Canadian players since 2005, I know the talent, I know the level of players that have been here, and I know all we needed was a platform. All we needed was a platform for guys to play and show themselves. So doesn't surprise me a bit. Doesn't surprise me that, we've done so well as Forge. Doesn't surprise me that we've done well against continental competition, because once you give us those opportunities, we're definitely going to go after them. And, we've got the level. We're also recruiting some quality players from foreign countries and foreign leagues that add to that quality. So I think it's only going to get better.
Last question, and this is a personal one for me. You've said the name Pep Guardiola, and you've also mentioned the words Manchester City. I am a supporter of the Blues. There's a big game against Arsenal this weekend. What do you see happening at the Etihad?
Well, here's what we talk about. Big clubs find a way and are resilient and get things done. So I think it's Man City's game.
Yes. Bobby, I hope you have a big victory. 3 points are awarded on Saturday. It's been great kind of digging into what you are all about, what this franchise is all about. We here in Hamilton, obviously, there's a lot of people that love this sport, and it is great to see you guys doing so well. And I think 2026 is going to be another trophy-filled year. So congratulations, and thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much. We're looking forward to the same.
All right, folks, that's your Sportsline Podcast for the day. And if you've just seen and heard, we love talking sports. We love talking to winners. If you do know of an athlete, team, or event to promote, the Sportsline Podcast, you want to hear from you. Please hit that thumbs up, like, and subscribe button if you have something to say. Always appreciate your comments. For the outstanding people that make the Sportsline Podcast roll on, thank you so very much, guys. And we'll see you very soon.